Hello everyone and welcome back to the Podcasters Podcast. My name's Louie and today we're talking about the top mistakes that I see clients do as an editor in a podcast agency. So I've been with Progressive for about 6 years now, and I've seen hundreds of clients and what they do. And don't get me wrong, we have some amazing clients doing some really, really good stuff. But over the years, I've seen some really big mistakes that I want to make you guys aware of so that you can get a bit of you can be better than them when you guys start your podcasting journey. The first big mistake that people make is that they don't listen to their environment before they start recording. Obviously, the space that you record a podcast in is very important to the sound quality and how you feel when recording a podcast. What we're looking to do here is reduce any echo and try and dampen the sound and reduce any kind of extraneous variables that can tamper with your recording. Obviously, in a space like this, it's a slightly echoey room, I'll be honest with you, but it's quite quiet, it's a respected space, everyone knows what they're doing, we're recording a podcast in here, but where you're recording could be completely different. So this is how you combat that. What I want you to do is when you walk into your space, obviously decide where you're recording first. Is it at a desk or is it in a room, or a living room, kitchen, whatever? Go in and just listen to the space. Listen to what's happening around you. Is there any buzzing, any fans that you can turn off, any fridges if you're in the kitchen, air conditioning units, wind even, anything that is kind of a low-level hum? Your brain usually tunes this out, so you really need to pay attention and actually listen to it so that you can change it or move or adapt or whatever's going on there. So that's the first thing you need to do, is listen to your environment, and then you won't get those horrible noises coming in. As a podcast editor, I have seen many weird and wonderful recording locations. I once had someone record a podcast literally on a beach where the wind is blowing. There's like a storm going on, and it's absolutely mental. And I've even had someone do a podcast next to a runway, which I really, really wouldn't recommend. So let's say you're recording a podcast in a living room or more of a public space. What can you do to then restrict this kind of echo or any weird noises that are happening? So the first thing I recommend you do is get any soft furnishings that you can. So if you're in your house, for example, think about rugs, think about curtains, think about pillows, anything like that. Obviously, the professionals will have soundproofing and those kind of black panels that they stick to the wall. Obviously, go ahead and buy those if you want to, but you might not want that in your living room. So think about what soft furnishings you can bring into play to try and dampen the noise down. And of course, another thing that causes unwanted noises in your recording is you. You yourself make noise, especially if there's stuff to tap and to fidget with and to click and things like that. So you need to limit yourself. Get rid of any clicky pens, any jewelry, anything that rustles, anything like that. Me personally, I'm like constantly fidgeting, so my leg will be like bouncing up and down whilst I'm talking. Try and calm down for a minute. Take a breath and try and notice those habits as they're happening. The problem with all of this, especially the shaking or the tapping and things like that, is those vibrations will shake your microphone, and that will cause weird popping, weird bouncy noises, things like that can't necessarily be removed in post-production. So just be very, very mindful of that. Another way that you can mitigate that issue of the vibrations is to get your microphone away from your desk. A lot of people have microphone stands that either sit on the desk or are clamped to the desk. And then obviously any vibrations that you're sending through the desk will go up into your recording. Try and get yourself a microphone stand that either sits on the floor like the one I have here, or is one of those big fancy arms that you see that can swing around. Those things have the microphone standing in free space, and that means that there's no vibrations that can go up through the microphone. Another big mistake that I see that podcasters do all the time is that they don't position their microphone properly. One of the horror stories that I got from my clients was that they came to me and they said, Louie, I've set up my microphone, but it's just not picking up my voice. Like, it's plugged in, the gain's up, it's all making sense, but I can't hear it properly. And I said to them, well, is your microphone pointing in the right direction? Now, there's a simple answer to this, and there's a more complicated answer to this. So the rule of thumb is that your microphone should be sat about 4 to 5 inches away from your face like this. Obviously, think about where you're going to move as you start recording. You might naturally lean back or you might lean forward. You might get louder, you might get quieter. So that's why it's really handy to have it on an arm or something so that you can go with it or it can come with you wherever you go. So about 3 to 4 to 5 inches away from your face. Obviously, listen to it and see if it sounds good. First of all, that's a good indication of where it is. But also, you might find that you end up with these plosive sounds. Now, if I can recreate this, sorry if you're listening to this, but sometimes you can get some P's or some B's coming through the podcast microphone, and they register as some really horrible popping noises in your ears, and they can't really be removed from the recording either. A way to mitigate that, if you're finding that you're getting lots of those, is to angle the microphone to the corner of your mouth. Let me demonstrate. So the P's and B's are coming from the fact that you're blowing air into the diaphragm of the microphone, and that causes that horrible noise. So if you think that your mouth is blowing air out this way, just angle your microphone to the corner of your mouth so that you're like talking one way and then it's picking you up from another way, and you'll mitigate those plosives. One other thing that I see my podcasters do is that they don't make eye contact with the camera, or they really struggle with it. Now, eye contact is a really interesting thing when it comes to cameras. Obviously, I've got my wonderful assistant here in the studio with me, but apart from that, you are the only people that I'm talking to, and you're just a camera to me. You're just a lens, and people find it really difficult to engage with that. So imagine that the lens is a portal to your audience, and you've really got to try to kind of look right down the lens at people like that. Other things you can do to help with that is to get a teleprompter or something like that and strap it to the front of the camera. A few of my clients do that, and that really helps them look in the right place. Obviously, if you've got a script and you've got it like down on the desk or even off to the side of the camera, people can tell if you're just looking past the camera and it doesn't feel quite natural. So make sure to keep it locked on the audience. Obviously, if you've got a guest in the room and you're doing an interview, there's a bit of an interesting dynamic there because you want to talk to your guest, but you also want to talk to the people at home. So consider, as the host, the amazing host that you are, what is the amount of time that you're going to spend talking to the people at home versus your guest? Are you going to introduce the episode here and then talk for a bit and then maybe pause it there and come back over here? What are you going to do? How are you going to address the people at home? Because the more that you can address and connect with the people at home, you there, maybe sat on the toilet, who knows, the more that you are likely to subscribe and engage and do the things that I tell you to do. So you want to start a podcast, but you don't know how. First of all, like and subscribe and have a look around the channel. There's lots of useful videos to help you on your way to starting, scaling, and thriving in your podcast career. Also, did you know that we run a 3-day event over here in Peterborough called the Podcast Profit System? Come join us in a room of like-minded individuals, meet the progressive team, learn how we do things, and there's a free lunch thrown in as well. All right, let's get back to the video. Another mistake that I see podcasters making is that they don't watch their levels. A lot of people just set the microphone up, they maybe do a bit of a check, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and then they don't check it for the whole podcast. That is incredibly dangerous because what might happen is, as you start to talk, you might get louder, you might get quieter. Sometimes what we find is when people launch into an episode, they really kind of ramp up and give it some beans. So when they're checking beforehand, they might set the gain at a certain number, and then they launch into it and overload the microphone, and then that creates peaking, and then that can distort the recording, which isn't quite what we want. Another thing that can happen is that as you get more relaxed, you can start to lean back slightly in your chair. Then you move away from the microphone and you become quieter. And if you don't check it, again, you're going to mess with the recording slightly. Another thing that can happen is if you've got a guest with you and they start to get emotional or they start to cry or something like that, they might get a lot more quieter and they might, whatever, like, and you need to then be there to turn them up and be like, can you cry louder, please? Or I can't hear you. So the way you manage all of this is to wear headphones. Okay. Now, a lot of people don't like wearing headphones. And if you don't want to wear headphones, that's fine. But you need someone listening to the recording. So obviously I'm in a studio right now and I've got my lovely assistant Jamie here to help. He is listening to everything that I'm saying and he can stop me if, something breaks, there's a connection that's loose, if I'm doing something without knowing, if I'm tapping or clicking or making a weird sound, he can then stop me and I can restart. If you're not listening to your recording, you don't know if it's broken or not, and you can't restart. You can't stop yourself. You can't begin again. So it's really important that you wear headphones so that you can monitor it as you go. Also, you're a podcaster. Headphones look professional. So get yourself and your guests some headphones and you'll just look the part. Why not? It's a win-win. Another big mistake that people make when they're podcasting is that they don't drink water. First of all, stay hydrated. It's a really good thing to do. But second of all, if you have a dry mouth, your voice gets all clammy and you make these really disgusting mouth noises that you'll only notice when you're editing it out later on, and you'll be horrified. Some of the noises I've heard you don't want to hear. So always have some water nearby, take regular breaks between podcasts, and just give yourself the best opportunity to bring energy to the podcast, because that's what people connect with, is energy. What I always say to people when they come to the event that we host here at Progressive is a wet mouth is a happy mouth. So keep that in mind. Whilst I'm on the topic of drinking water and making noises and things like that, do bear in mind that if you have some sort of cup that makes a noise, just be careful when you're handling it or moving it around. If you need a drink, just take a break. It's fine. Just avoid at all costs those sippy cup things. That's disgusting. No one wants to hear that. Another big mistake that podcasters make, especially for me as an editor, is that they don't keep pacing or mistakes in mind when they're recording. So obviously, if you're recording, and you make a mistake for whatever any reason, so let's say I fumble over my words here, you've really got to think about how you then pick it back up so that the edit can be made seamless. Now, in a studio like this, what I can do is if I fumble, I can then go to the main camera or swap cameras, and then that cut can be made and it's more seamless because we cut to a different angle. Or what can happen is, so there I just made a mistake, I fumbled on my words. What you do then in that scenario is you leave a pause. So when you're editing, what will happen is you see a waveform when people are talking. So you see me talking. If you make a mistake or you fumble, just leave a gap of silence in the recording, like that, maybe a couple of seconds longer. And the editor will be able to see that pause and immediately know that something happened. Whether you're just taking a break or taking a breath or thinking, you can just investigate that in the edit and see what was going on at that moment. Obviously, if you leave a gap there, you don't necessarily have to make edit notes because it's kind of visible in the editing timeline. But if you can make editing notes, editors will love you for it. Now, I don't mean sat here with a notepad and pen making a note every time you mess up. That's not exactly what I mean. But say you've got a guest and they say something that maybe was a bit too personal for them, or they want to take it back and they didn't quite mean it, whatever. It'd be really great if you can provide your editor with a note that says, at this moment in time, this just needs to be considered or cut out. You will save yourself so much time, maybe making amendments and things like that, because editors are great, and we have a great time in the office editing people's work. But sometimes if you want something that only you know about, convey it in an edit note, and then it's black and white, crystal clear. No mistakes will be made. Another mistake that people make when they're recording their podcast is they forget to plan their episode. Now, I'm going to do another episode about, should you plan in the first place? How much should you plan? But some people write entire scripts for their show. Some people have a couple of bullet points, things like that. But what we find is a lot of clients come to the studio completely unprepared. And I find that quite hard to get my head around, because you've come to this space, you've got finite time, you need to be ready to deliver something. Otherwise, you're just going to come across like you don't really know what you're talking about, which is a massive shame and a massive waste of energy and time. So what I would suggest you do is, at the very least, create some bullet points of where you want to start, where you want to go in the middle, and where you want to end. Obviously, one of the things we need to avoid when we're recording is rambling, going on too much, because if you're rambling, you might be able to use that for another episode. You want to be able to be concise so that you can, make your podcast go on for longer in the long term. Don't start talking about other topics, because that's another episode entirely. So if you have notes, you can clearly see where you want to go, and you keep yourself on track and stop yourself from rambling. Also, in an episode like this one, I've got each point that I want to talk about laid out in front of me. Now, because I've been doing this for years and it's my profession, I can take a bullet point and talk around it for a minute or so. Because, and you guys will be the same, if you truly know what you're talking about, you'll be able to elaborate on basic points. People that kind of need to write a whole script out, unless they're being, really creative about it, usually that's because they're a bit more unsure about what they're doing. So you should be good with some bullet points, start, middle, end. This also applies to interviews as well. If you're interviewing someone, you really want to turn up to that interview with a guide, an idea of where you want to go with the interview. Don't start, and this is a massive pet peeve of mine, by the way, guys, don't start by asking your guest for their life story. Don't say, right, hello, Jim, how did it all begin for you? Because then you have a really, really boring beginning 10 minutes of your podcast where they go, well, I went to school here and I was born here and then I did this job for 5 years and then I did something that was amazing and relevant and grabby. Start your podcast interviews and start your podcasts in general, whatever it is, with the most interesting part of the content or the hook, right? And plan that beforehand so you know what you're going to do. Also, with an interview, you need to be able to, drag people back in, bring them through the episode with you. You're the host, right? You need to guide them. Your guest is naive to it. Maybe they haven't been on a show before. You are the professional. You are the host. You need to bring them through it. So have your bullet points. Think about where you want to start, middle, end again. But also feel free to, react to what they're doing in the moment. That is a skill that you will develop over time. So once you're comfortable, you'll get used to it. But always have some sort of plan. And just to finish up, the worst thing that I see people doing when they start a podcast is giving up. They come to maybe they come to our events, or maybe you decide that you want to start a podcast yourself. You'll, do the research about the equipment, you'll get the microphone, you'll buy everything, you'll sit in your living room or at your desk or whatever, and you'll record an episode, and then you'll listen to it back and you'll go, ugh, that's the worst thing I've ever heard in my life. Remember, the first episode that you ever record will be probably the worst episode that you'll ever record, but everyone's got to start somewhere. Everyone's got to record an episode, right? So what I urge you to do is not give up. Most podcasters don't make it to episode 10. So aim to record at least 10 episodes and then see how you feel. Sometimes I get clients come to me and they have a bit of a creative burnout. They come to me and say, I've ran out of ideas. What can I do? And that's when it really helps to have someone that obviously wants to help you and nurture you, kind of explore what your podcast can be. Experiment with the format, get interesting people on, try something different, especially when you're starting and you're growing. Maybe no one's watching, maybe no one's listening, or maybe a couple of your closest family and friends are. Experiment, be creative, and just get comfortable and go crazy with it. That wraps it up for the top mistakes that podcasters can make when they start podcasting. I've been Louie. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you guys in the next episode.